When ancestral stories interfere with the medicine you carry, that is what we are talking about today. We're talking about those ancestral stories that can interfere with your medicine that you naturally carry inside of you. These stories are often referred to as curses, family patterns, ancestral wounds. I call them stories and interference. They're just stories that our ancestors lived that are now living inside of us. And we're going to focus today on just four stories: abandonment, anger, abuse, and betrayal. I have a total of eight stories, but we're going to focus on four today, and then we'll do the next four next week. These stories can affect support and safety and visibility. They often impact how we trust, not just ourselves or other people, but how we trust the guidance that's flowing to us. They impact your inherited medicine and they can interfere with it translating to you in a way that allows you to turn it into meaningful work and into form. Welcome to the Conjure Room. I'm Dr. MoNique, the trusted ancestral advisor for women and some men over 50 who are ready to understand their inherited medicine and gifts and turn it into a lived experience. Turn it into work that you truly, truly are just passionate about. And for many, it's about leaving a legacy. So this week, we're beginning with a two-part series. The first part is about the four stories that I mentioned, and then we'll focus next week on the four other stories. And those are fear, grief, shame, and scarcity. An ancestral story can interfere with the medicine you carry without making that medicine actually go away. The medicine is still there, your gifts are still present, but that story or those stories may be interfering with it. The wisdom you've earned through living, leading, learning, working, mothering, serving, building, healing, and surviving are still inside of you. All of those are still there. The medicine in your bloodline is always present for you. But there's oftentimes a story that's working underneath that medicine that is causing some interference or causing some conflict. And I often see this in women that come to work with me who are feeling like they just don't know what they want to offer. They're not sure. They know there's something there. They know something is emerging. They know it's different than what they've done before, but they can't put their finger on it. And oftentimes this comes with a little bit of fear. And that's when I know there's a story underneath there, an ancestral story that may be impacting how that message and that medicine is being received. So that's what we're talking about today. And before I go into any of these talks, and before I develop what the talk is, I always have a sit down with the ancestors. And I sit in silence and I ask them, what is it that people need that will be showing up and participating today? What is the conversation? What is the message? What is the message that they have? And this time the message that came through was really interesting to me. And one of the things that they said is don't hesitate to act on your medicine. And don't mistake hesitation or lack of clarity for the absence of that medicine. Hesitation is showing where there's often a story that is still holding on to your authority. And that really landed deeply with me because many of the women I work with are not sitting around wondering if they have any value. They have lived and they have so much to offer. They know they have wisdom. They know they have some gifts. They know they have something meaningful to offer. So the question is often different. The question that they are asking is, what am I supposed to do with what I carry now? How do I bring this gift forward in a way that feels right for me? What is mine to carry? And what is it that I'm carrying from past generations that I need to let go of? That is where ancestral guidance becomes extremely important. The ancestors can help reveal the difference between the medicine you're carrying and the story that is interfering with that medicine. And that's where the ancestors can really support us with what we're offering, what we're doing, how we're showing up in the world. But they also can help us understand where some of the visibility that we need and want is being blocked or interfered with. An ancestral story, sometimes people will ask me, well, what really is an ancestral story? Well, an ancestral story is a story that you inherited. It has meaning and it travels through your bloodline. It can be a belief, it can be a warning, some type of an emotional imprint, it can be a family silence, something that was never spoken, a survival pattern, a body memory, something that just really holds in your body and you're not really consciously aware of it. And sometimes it's spoken directly. A grandmother says, don't trust anyone. A mother may say, keep something for yourself because people will leave you. And you may have an auntie that said, don't get too big, people will turn on you. Those are messages that are passed down, sometimes not even consciously. So they may not even come out exactly like that, but they're stories that are passed down from generation to generation. And so one of the things that happened for me years ago, my best friend, who was I was a maid of honor in her wedding. I introduced her to her husband, and just before, I'm seeing that my video is doing some funny things over here, so let me just see if we can stop that real quick. Let's just stop the video, turn it back on, and see if we can get it to stop jumping around like that. So years ago, as I was mentioning, my friend was getting married and I was in her wedding. I was her maid of honor. I'd introduced her to her husband, and her grandmother came in to share some words of advice for her about marriage. And one of the messages that she told her is never allow your single friends around your husband. And I thought, that's interesting. I'm single. I introduced her to her husband. I've been her best friend since we were in elementary school. And her grandmother is sharing the story with her. So I didn't think too much of it. And then I noticed after she got married, she began to disappear. I didn't see her as much. I didn't hear from her as much. And she eventually told me that they were really spending more time with couples. And I was like, okay, I understand. Relationships change sometimes. But what I found later on, years later, when she came back to me and she started calling me and interacting with me again, was that she had spent most of her marriage involved with couples where the women had been mean to her, had deceived her, had betrayed her, had even in one case tried to destroy her relationship with her husband and her family. And she now wanted to reestablish our friendship. And I forgave her for the disappearance, but I noticed that the relationship never really was quite the same anymore. And that was okay. But what I did notice is now that we had reestablished this relationship, it had changed into one where I was her go-to person for conversations about the women that she was spending time with that were a part of these couples. So I decided that it was time for me to just kind of step back a little bit. But that message caused her, as she said, that message from her grandmother caused her to disconnect from the women who had been her support system, who had cared about her and who had been in her life for a very long time. Those are some of the stories that get passed down, and then we consciously or unconsciously make decisions based on those stories. Now, this was over 30 years ago. She's still married, she's still happily married, and I'm happy that, that has worked out well for her. So sometimes in families, Some of these things aren't even said out loud. In this case, her grandmother spoke it, but sometimes they're not said out loud. But then everyone still lives by it. The family may never name the rule, but the women know visibility has consequences. Nobody explains why receiving support is unsafe, but the body prepares for disappointment before help even arrives. No one says truth is dangerous, yet every woman learns how to soften her knowing and hide her gifts until it becomes acceptable. And that is how ancestral stories begin to move through families. They are consciously and unconsciously passed from generation to generation, just like the gifts and medicine that you carry today. So that's how they really are important for us to understand. I should say that's why they're really important for us to understand, because we carry the beautiful things that our ancestors passed us, and then we carry these stories that create interference. And we need to understand both. We need to know what they both are. The stories aren't because our ancestors are trying to hurt us. A lot of times people say, oh, are my ancestors trying to hurt me? Are they being deceiving and deceitful? And what I notice in the sessions with my clients, what the ancestors tell me when we connect with them is that they're not trying to harm, they're trying to protect. Because oftentimes, what my client is experiencing is something that an ancestor experienced. And now that ancestor wants to provide protection, they want to help. And so that story begins to interfere. So many stories begin as protection. Somebody in the lineage learned how to survive. Somebody learned what to avoid. Somebody learned how to stay quiet, work harder, read the room, hide the gift, hold the family together, or keep going without asking for very much. A lot of women have what I call entire graduate degrees and keep going without asking for very much, or you got this and I don't need to rely on anyone, and maybe they won't even be there if I do rely on them. And I call that a degree that absolutely no university conferred, but the training has been thorough through our lived experiences and our ancestral experiences. And the issue is that sometimes that story actually did help the bloodline survive. And now it's interfering with the medicine you're carrying forward. And that's where the healing actually begins. So, for many women that are in this season of life, they're starting from scratch. Not from scratch in terms of not having any lived experience, but they're starting from scratch in terms of having a connection with the ancestors that reveal this medicine. And what has happened is we've earned and learned our wisdom through our life experiences. We have credentials, we've raised children, we've built careers, served clients, we've held families together, earned credentials that most people would never even consider going for, certifications, created businesses, led teams, ministered to others, and you might even be the person that everybody calls on when there's a problem. So when an ancestral story interferes, it doesn't always look like it's stopping or blocking something. And I want to make that clear, because oftentimes we think that if there's an ancestral story or a wound or a curse or a family pattern, that it's always stopping something. It doesn't necessarily stop it all the time. It interferes with it. It sometimes makes it more difficult. Sometimes it shows up as a strain. You're capable, but you're tired in a way that rest and sleep doesn't fully resolve. People trust your wisdom, they trust your steadiness and your discernment, but they may still, and you may still, second guess the guidance that's coming through you. Something meaningful is asking for your attention, and the shape of it may still be unclear. And that's why I say this season that we're in, that many of us are in, what's happening in the world right now is calling for something deeper. It's calling for a different way of living, moving, and using what we've inherited. It's calling for more support. It's calling for a clearer voice, a safer relationship with visibility, a different way of receiving, a more grounded way to trust your ancestors and the medicine that you have inside of you. And that's why we're looking at these stories. We listen for the places where the inherent story may be pressing on your medicine. And this is where my work with ancestral stories is different. My work with ancestral story healing is different because we focus on the stories that are preventing you from fully embodying your gifts, your medicine, the message you want to share, the method that's supposed to come through you. And when we heal those stories, it creates an opening for the current and future generations to use their inherited gifts and stand in their power in a way that maybe we weren't fully able. So let's dive into the stories. The first one is abandonment. The abandonment story often makes support feel unreliable. And when I did a survey to see which stories are the stories that people are most challenged with, I actually thought it was going to be scarcity, and it wasn't. Abandonment was one of the top ones. You don't have to experience abandonment to carry the story. I want to make that clear. Just because abandonment is one of the stories, it doesn't mean that you were carrying the story. It means that you may have an ancestor who experienced abandonment. An ancestor that experienced abandonment from a parent, and that parent could have left, the parent may have died, war, enslavement, the Holocaust, or some of the atrocities that can contribute to abandonment stories in the lineage. I think I'm having so many problems today with let's try this again. Let's do one thing. See if we can change this problem and improve this. Okay. My computer did some updates, so I don't know if that has something to do with it, but sorry about that. And as I said, you don't have to experience the abandonment personally. It could be a parent that had an experience with abandonment, or a great great grandmother, or someone in your family lineage that you don't actually know. And abandonment could have come through war, enslavement, the Holocaust, or some other atrocity. And all of those can contribute to abandonment stories in the lineage. But what I hear from women, a lot of electromagnetic shifts going on globally. Thank you for that, Deb. Yeah, interesting. What I'm hearing from the women that I work with in the messages that I hear from them when it comes to abandonment are things like, I'll just do it myself. That's a big one. I should be able to handle this. I can't trust people to do it the right way or to get it done. I know people mean well, but support usually disappears for me. This story can hide behind capability. That is why it can be hard to really recognize when people are experiencing abandonment stories. A woman can be strong and wise and organized and disciplined and deeply responsible. She may have been praised her whole life for holding things together. Maybe the one that the family trusts, one that her clients depend on, one that the community will assume responsibility and will know what the next steps need to be. But when abandonment is active, receiving support can feel suspicious. Asking for help may feel unsettling. And she may feel like she's setting herself up for disappointment. Even spiritual support can feel distant. And that's a big one. Because when abandonment stories are in our family lineage, it can make us feel like our ancestors, our guidance is distant. We may not experience it, we may not hear it, we may have a difficult time connecting. So you may believe in your ancestors and still feel you have to carry this entire work alone. This matters when a new expression of work or legacy is trying to come through for you. The medicine you carry requires support. You need support. It may require counsel, a community structure, rest, collaboration. It may be a deeper relationship with your ancestors. But where you are now and what you're carrying right now in this season that you're in requires support. But unfortunately, that abandonment story will tell you don't depend on anyone. Your ancestors may be saying you're not meant to carry this by yourself, but you may still feel like you have to do it all alone. So, in ancestral story healing, what I do is I listen for where that story actually began. Which ancestor? What was the story? What was the problem? And it's interesting because when I share these with people and I share the origin of the story, what I find is people will then do some of their own family history and find that it was completely accurate. The ancestors share their stories with me. That is my gift. That is my medicine. And I'm able to share those stories with you. So that's one of the ways that I utilize my medicine. So for some people, maybe there was a death in the family. Maybe there was migration, divorce, maybe some kind of an emotional absence or a family rupture. It could be poverty, exile, enslavement, a long pattern of women being left to manage too much with too little help. Those are many of the ways that ancestral stories of abandonment show up. That's how they started, that's where they originated. And we don't shame these women because they survived it. And that's important too. We honor what they actually had to become in order to survive those stories. Then we ask, what's ready to be changed now? And we ask for their guidance. What can we change about this story? How do we heal this story? How do we release this story? How do we now bring the ancestors that experienced this abandonment story into our counsel so that now they can be a source of support instead of trying to protect us? So healing may begin when support feels spiritually safe. It may begin when you recognize that accepting help doesn't diminish your strength. That's when you start to know that something is shifting. And it may begin when you allow your ancestors to show you that the work you are here to carry doesn't require you to carry it alone. That isolation is not a proof of devotion or a way to honor your ancestors. They want to support you, they're here to support you. We have to let them in. Story number two, the story, this one. This one is anger. And anger can be a little bit complicated to identify in the lineage for some people, because in some situations, in some families, anger was dangerous. It led to punishment, rejection, violence, in some cases, shame, silence, and exile. In other families, anger became the only recognized form of power. People had to raise their voice to be heard. They had to be hard in order to be respected. They had to fight because softness was not protected. Both patterns can affect how women relate to their truth and their power. Remember, you don't have to live these stories. I want to share this, I want to say this again. You don't have to personally live these stories to carry them. So if you're thinking, well, that didn't experience that, you may not have experienced it. Maybe you did, but you can still carry any of these stories. If anger was dangerous in your bloodline, you may soften your message until the medicine becomes unclear. You may know exactly what you see when you're in private, and then it becomes vague when it's time to speak it publicly. You may worry that directness may look harsh, it may make you feel disloyal or difficult. And I hear that one a lot. If I speak my truth and I'm direct, then I'll be labeled as difficult. And for some women, they'll even say, I feel unsafe to love. And that's what they've experienced. So if anger was the only form of power the family understood, you may carry intensity that belongs to the bloodline more than your current moment. The truth may come wrapped like in an old fire sometimes. And this doesn't make you wrong. It just means that we have to listen to this story. So, for women in carrying inherited medicine, this matters because the work often requires a voice. And if we're dealing with anger stories in our family lineage and sharing our voice is being interfered with because of those anger stories, they need to be healed. Because our teaching requires a voice. Advisory work requires a voice. Writing requires a voice. Whatever it is that you want to do, you need to have a voice. And if anger stories are interfering with that voice, they need to be healed. Spiritual authority requires the ability to say what has been given to you without apologizing to anyone for that clarity. And I'm going to say this with love. Sometimes the ancestors are not asking you to soften the message. Sometimes they're asking you to stop confusing clarity with cruelty. And an anger story can make the truth feel dangerous. Ancestral guidance can help restore a more mature relationship with your voice, with your authority, with spiritual responsibility. So inside the healing work, what we ask is, where did the anger become unsafe? Where did silence become protection? Where did the bloodline learn that power had to look like something that was being forced? What truth is ready to be spoken now without carrying the whole burden of the old story? When this story, these anger stories, begin to heal, the voice can become clearer. You become more visible. The medicine becomes more precise. A woman can speak with authority without feeling as though she has to fight for the right to be heard. Those are anger stories. Number 3, abuse. The third story that we talk about in one of the 8 is abuse. And this one, I always say, deserves a little bit of care because many of us have people in our family lineage that experienced abuse, whether it was most recently or 5, 6, 10 generations ago. And when there's abuse in the family lineage, it can really affect the feeling of safety, embodiment. It can impact power, visibility, money, intimacy, spiritual authority, and the right to take up space. When abuse is active, visibility may feel unsafe in the body. You may feel uncomfortable when it's time to be more visible. A woman may know she carries a medicine and still contract when it's time to name that medicine because of those abuse stories. She may want to be seen for her work, but nervous when it's time to really remember what she wants to be known for. And she starts to feel like it's unsafe to be known for it. Sometimes when abuse stories show up, we may feel like we know that there's some spiritual authority, but our body isn't feeling this safety around holding that authority. It can show up as, discomfort in the body, a sensation in the stomach, fluttering of the heart, anxiety in some cases. And these stories oftentimes teach a family to hide its gifts. Abuse stories can teach a woman to disconnect from her body. It can make power feel really dangerous instead of sacred. Some women in the lineage may even be harmed for their beauty, their voice, their money, their spiritual gifts, intelligence, sexuality, refusal, independence, and visibility. If those things occurred with anyone throughout your lineage, then abuse stories may show up. And the body carries those stories. The body can carry that message even if you're saying, I'm ready. So, this is why when people say, oh, I'm just going to show up, that often isn't deep enough because that story is still playing underneath everything. You can put the post up, you can do the video, you can make the offer, you can force yourself to be visible. And the body says, wait a minute, excuse me, we need to discuss these family files that are showing up. And the body often wins. This is why ancestral story and healing actually matters. We don't force the body to move faster than when it's ready. We listen. We ask the story that is trying to protect it. We ask, what is it? Where did it originate? How did it form? What do we need to do to let go of it? And we ask, how is it influencing her now? And then we ask the ancestors during that session, what needs to be understood? What needs to be released and restored and refined and strengthened so the medicine can be carried safely? When this story begins to heal, what I notice is that women begin to stand in their authority without confusing visibility with danger. They feel more comfortable with being visible. And I find that they let that medicine run through the bloodline in a way that they never realized they could experience. She begins to really take up space in a way that honors her body and her spiritual gifts. Number 4, the last one. The fourth story is betrayal. Betrayal. This is another one that it was sort of a lot of times when I've done some of these surveys and I've talked to my clients and the women that I work with, abandonment and betrayal kind of go hand in hand. And you'll find that a lot of these stories actually relate to each other. And when I've done the surveys, I found that sometimes it's abandonment, sometimes it's betrayal that comes out as number one based on what's happening. So this story, betrayal, betrayal is a big one because it affects how we trust. It affects how we trust people. It affects how we trust the timing of things. It impacts how we trust guidance. We trust the opportunities that are showing up. And for some women, how we trust ourselves. When betrayal is active, a woman may receive guidance and still hesitate. She hesitates, she's not sure. She may feel the ancestors are opening something and then immediately wonder, what's it going to cost me? She may sense that there's an opportunity, a real opportunity, but then some part of her waits for the hidden condition or something about it to fall apart. She oftentimes may keep her medicine private because being fully known has not always been safe for her or her lineage. Betrayal may have entered the lineage through broken promises, stolen labor, family secrets, spiritual misuse, that's a big one, financial deception, some type of romantic harm that may have taken place, or professional harm, or some type of a community wound. Once betrayal becomes a story, everything new gets filtered through that story. It gets filtered through what actually happened. And this is important because discernment is healthy. Suspicion, that's a whole nother thing. Discernment actually listens, but suspicion protects before it has enough information. The betrayal story can make guidance feel really risky. Your ancestors may be offering direction, but the story may ask, what is this going to cost me? The question deserves respect. It may come from a real place, but the question should not automatically become the authority over your next season. An ancestral story healing allows us to listen for the difference between the current guidance and the inherited suspicion that may be coming up. So a woman can move with wisdom instead of bracing for harm. We can shift that when we're dealing with these stories. You can allow support without handing power away. You can receive guidance without forcing it through some type of a wound first. Here's what I want you to understand about this. The story is often near the medicine. Any of these stories are often near the medicine. The place where support feels unsafe may be near the work that requires you to hold it differently. The place where truth feels risky may be near what you're here to teach, what you're here to offer. And the place where visibility feels unsafe may be near the medicine that's asking for you to embody it. And the place where trust feels complicated may be near the guidance your ancestors are trying to strengthen. And that's why I don't approach ancestral stories as something to fix in isolation. They're not just stories that need to be fixed. I listen for the story, and then I listen to the ancestors tell me how it's interfering with your medicine. I ask, what is the medicine nearby? What gift is being protected, hidden, distorted, or delayed? What earned wisdom is ready to be used differently than you've used it before? And what form is trying to come forward? Is there a method? Is there some type of legacy project? Is there a community project? Is there an offer that is trying to come forward? Is there a new business trying to come forward, a new career trying to come forward? And this is the heart of ancestral advisory. My role is to give voice to the messages your ancestors want you to hear and need you to hear. Sometimes these messages bring comfort. Sometimes they bring correction. Sometimes they even name what you already knew, but you weren't trusting. And sometimes they reveal a story underneath the hesitation so the medicine can move with more clarity and ease and naturally. And that's the work that I do. That's how my medicine flows through me. It allows me to connect with the ancestors, to see where these stories are interfering, to identify your inherited medicine and how it can come to form and shape what you're doing in the next season of your life, and then work with you to establish your own relationship with the ancestors so that you're not dependent upon me. You build your own relationship so that you can hear the ancestors that are part of your wisdom council that are here to help you and support you on your journey. And that work is all a part of the Wise Ancestor Path. The Wise Ancestor Immersion is for women over 50 who are ready to really understand the inherited gifts that you naturally carry and understand that medicine that's flowing to you and how to use what you've earned and learned through your experiences to form something new as you step into this new season of your life. Because most of us are not finished. We have things to do. We have things to offer. We have legacies we want to create. We have businesses that we want to build. For some women, it's, a huge business with employees. And for most of the women that I work with, it's something small. They've built before, they've created before, and now they want to do something that they enjoy, something that doesn't require them to sacrifice their personal lives, but allows them to enjoy what they're doing. So inside the immersion, we build those ancestral relationships. We identify the inherited medicine. We heal the stories. We make sure that we continue those connections and we bring your work to form. And that form, as I said, can be a business, a book, a community, an offer, a career path, some type of a teaching path that you want to lead, a ministry, or it can be an advisory path. The form is truly important, and it's your unique way of sharing your medicine and your gifts. But I want to ask you these deeper questions, and I want you to just think about them and just take some time over the next week to really look at them. What are you here to carry forward? What are you feeling? You may not be able to fully name it, and that's okay. Just think about it. What are you here to carry forward now? Now, this isn't a question that another template or strategy can answer for you. This is really some deep going in and having a connection with your ancestors, your soul, your intuition, and yourself to know what this is for you. And the ancestors, they actually have the guidance for you. And I have an invitation for you. This week, I'm offering 6 ancestral guidance and story healing sessions, just 6. I'm opening these up because I had a number of people that have sent me messages saying, are you still doing ancestral story healing? I know you're doing a lot of the inherited medicine work. Yes, I still do ancestral story healing, although it's a part of the bigger program that I offer. I decided to go ahead and open up a few sessions for people who really are at a point where they want to see what is that story. Now, there may be multiple stories, but we're looking at what is the main story that's causing interference with you bringing your gifts in medicine into the world. And we begin to look at how do we heal that story. And your ancestors will share spiritual practices. They will share mantras that you can use. They will share different ways of meditating and connecting with them that you can use to help heal that story after we've actually done the initial healing in the session. We heal the story. We receive guidance from your ancestors about what your next step should be so that you can begin to truly embody that beautiful medicine and that those gifts that naturally flow through you. We look at one of the 8 stories: abandonment, abuse, anger, betrayal, fear, shame, scarcity, and grief. Any one of those stories, you may already know which story is showing up. And if you do, then we focus on that story. If you don't, then we connect with the ancestors and find what story they are seeing is showing up that's preventing you from moving forward. And like I said, when you walk away, you'll have a plan of action for your next steps and you will have experienced a healing that allows you to release that story. So if you'd like one of these sessions and you know that a story is showing up for you and you really want to release that story and you'd like one of the sessions, all you have to do is, for those of you who connected with me through an email and were able to join us today, just click reply and type story, and I'll send you all of the information about the session and give you the next steps. If you're listening on Facebook, I'll come over and I'll pop the link in there as well. And for those who are listening to the replay, just put story in the comments and I will come and I will check in. So, those are our stories for this week. The 4 stories: abandonment, anger, abuse, and betrayal. Those are the first 4. Next week, we'll be looking at fear, grief, shame, and scarcity. Next week, we'll continue with part 2. I want to thank you again for being a part of the Conjure Room. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me. And thank you